Welcome to the Family Journey Show, brought to you by Finally Home. Each month, we'll be live with conversations between our Finally Home team and leading experts. Our mission is to provide you with the insights, strategies, and encouragement you need to navigate the unique challenges and joys of your family journey. Whether you're a foster parent, an adoptive caregiver, or a kinship guardian, this show is designed with you in mind. We'll be diving deep into topics that matter most to you, from managing big emotions and building strong family bonds to accessing mental health resources and advocating for your children's needs. So, grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's embark on this journey together. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Welcome to the Family Journey Show, where support, community, and resilience grow strong roots.
Hello, welcome to Finally Home's Family Journey Show. This is where we talk about things that matter to families like ours, foster, adoptive, and kinship families. I'm Kristen Orphan, co-founder of Finally Home.
Hi, I'm Mark Orphan. I'm the other co-founder of Finally Home, and I have the privilege today of introducing a really dear friend of mine and Kristen's, going back a long time, and also an advocate and supporter of Finally Home, Dick Foth. Dick has been married to his wife, Ruth, since 1963. They have 4 adult children, 12 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. And what we think is very special is that he happens to be the grandfather of 2 adopted children as well. The Foth's early career focused on college students, being a campus pastor in various settings, and then the president of Bethany Bible College. Foth moved to Washington, D.C. in 1993 to work with government and business leaders affiliated with the National Prayer Breakfast. Since 2008, they've lived in Northern Colorado. Dick is is on the teaching team of several churches across the country, and he's known as a collector of people, a connector, and a storyteller. Welcome, Dick. We are so honored to have you here with us today.
My joy. This is going to be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm excited to have Dick Foth here because I happen to have known him most of my life, since I was 5 years old. If we go back all the way to those days in Northern California when you were the president of Bethany Bible College and my family lived there. And you and my dad are longtime friends, and your ministry paths have crossed many times and in several states, which is pretty cool. Yeah. But I remember from a pretty young age listening. You would come through Champaign, Illinois as a guest speaker at my dad's church. And I always loved it when you came, because in those days, we went to church, we went to Sunday school, and then we all sat together as a family in church. And so we were listening to whoever came through. And I was always excited because I knew when you came, I would not be bored because you shared stories. And that was really interesting. Mark shared that 2 of your grandchildren joined your family through the gift of adoption. And, you've also been part of, I thought it was really interesting as I've gotten to know you over the years that, adoption is a part of your current family story, but there's a part of your growing up that I think is pretty relatable to families like ours, because you spent seasons of your childhood away from your parents. So right. Tell us a little bit about that. Mark shared what kind of your adult life, but what I want to hear is a little bit about your childhood and how that formed you.
Thank you. Yeah. And my childhood was so far away that I really have to think deeply about this. But I was born in Alameda, California, across the bay from San Francisco, adjacent to Oakland, on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 1942, 3 months after Pearl Harbor. When I was 2, my parents went to a conference where a single lady missionary stood up and said, "I want a man." She was from India. "I want a man." Of course, everybody, I guess, is going, "Whoa, okay." She said, "I want a man for India." As a result of that, my parents went as missionaries right at the end of World War II, traveled on a train from California to New York, and in the early summer of 1945, and the war, both parts, Europe and Asia, ended that summer. And by the end of August, 2 weeks after the end of the war, we're on a Swedish liner going to India, and ended up there for the next 4 years. And 3 of those 4 years, my sister and I were in a boarding school, hundreds of miles from our parents. So 9 months out of the year, we'd be in this British boarding school. And, I used to say, "Mother, please pass the water." I used to speak like that. I wish I still did. It has kind of an authority to it. But anyway, that distancing from parents at Hebron School up in the tea plantations in South India, 6,000 feet up in the tea plantations, that distancing throws you off a bit in terms of, well, how does all this work? Because you're being cared for by other people, you're all of that sort of thing. And but that early 7-year period shaped how I see the world, both that distancing and the other kinds of experiences. Because I'm wearing, we have old movies. I saw a clip the other day, and I'm wearing leather shoes, tall socks, short pants, sweater vest, little tie, little cap, carry an umbrella, for Pete's sake. I mean, I was British, but what that taught me, and I only came to this in the last few years, looking back on those years, it taught me 2 things about life that have served me very well. One is, life is a great adventure. I love ships. I love trains, because I used to go on a little cog railway. It took 3 hours to go 15 miles going up in the mountains. And I went and came on a ship. But 2 things. One, life is a great adventure. And secondly, you don't have to be afraid of different. We were a white colonial, right at the end of the colonial era. We were a white colonial bubble surrounded by a brown culture that did very different things and ate different things and all of that. And those 2 things going forward have served me very well, whether it was doing a church plant at the University of Illinois or college president, or especially in Washington, D.C. for 15 years. And so anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, Kristen.
Thank you, Dick, for sharing that. And you said that, our stories impact the way that we see the world in general, and certainly our childhood stories, but probably other chapters of our lives as well. That's certainly true. And for so many of our kids, the kids that we serve, that God has called us to serve, that are in foster care or been adopted or in kinship placements, what they have seen and experienced many times in those first very formative years of their lives is really hard.
Yep.
How can storytelling, particularly in family life, be used as a tool for healing for kids whose lives started in really difficult places?
Well, I've only come again in the last number of years to deeply thinking about story. By number of years at my age, it could be the last 25 years, really deeply thinking about story. And the truth is that our brains are wired for story. And I mean, whole industries, Hollywood, Bollywood, every corporation, they say, tell your story and all of that. We're wired for that, because that's how we have memories. That's how we remember. And sometimes that's great. And sometimes that's terrible. And when you're sitting with someone, no matter the age, who has gone through trauma or is going through trauma of any kind, or pain, platitudes don't help. For somebody to say, well, you shouldn't feel like that. It was too late. I already feel like that. And or suck it up, dude, be a man, or be a real independent woman. I don't think that gets it. But when we share stories, first of all, it gives the basis for friendship. It gives the basis for understanding. Someone has said, when you share your experiences, it's like a blood transfusion. And so to be able to listen to where someone is, and not try to fix it, but identify with it, is huge, isn't it? I mean, when you tell me your story, and I just heard you say it, Kristen, that I've known Dick Foth since I was a twerp. Well, you didn't say twerp. I said that since I was 5, right? And you're the age of our children, and you're friends with our kids.
Thanks for not mentioning my actual age.
Well, nobody
That would have been edited out, but go ahead.
Nobody wants to know you're 68. Nobody wants to know that just that little linkage that we know a place and a time that we identify with with each other is a profound thing. And I just think that piece, that the telling of your story is the basis not only for understanding, but any relationship we have. And I always like it because, and this is a little broader picture, but I see people as walking books. And that when you hear somebody's story, the way you read a walking book is by asking questions. That's how you turn the page. That's how you hear things. And I had the privilege of taking those 2 grandchildren to school because their dad had a little surgery yesterday, and so he's doing fine. But so they stayed overnight here, and their grandmother spoiled them, and I took him to school, and we had little conversations. And so we have a 15-year-old grandson, and we have a 9-year-old granddaughter, and they come from pretty different backgrounds, but they were both adopted when they were babies, when they were small. And but just to interact and ask them questions is it's a hoot, and you don't always get deep answers, but sometimes you do get deep answers. Anyway, I'm probably getting off track here, but I'm just
not at all. I love that. And what I do know about you, Dick, is you are genuinely interested in other people. And I would just say that's a gift to aspire to and pray for. I believe it's a God-honoring gift to be interested in people enough to see and want to know more about their story. When we're talking to families and often talking about how to resolve conflict or work things out, we already know we have different perspectives, different experiences, even sometimes, often different desires, desired outcomes. We say, look for areas of agreement and build on those things. And even as you use the example of story, you're saying it is our commonalities that can also unite us, that we have some shared experiences. And I think we can find shared experiences even with the most different of people. At first, like you said, to use the book analogy, don't judge a book by its cover. I mean, we can find, especially with fellow believers, always finding those areas that we get one another, where we can find that we can understand that. And so building on those areas. And I think that you're right. Stories actually can open those things up.
Sure. Well, and I can say to a head of state, and I have, we were in DC, or I can say this to a kid who grew up under a bridge in Yemen, right? Or in a boxcar in Indiana. I can ask this question: what did you do for fun as a kid? And the atmosphere changes like that. Just boom. Because even if you're poor or even if you're hurting, kids have a way of kicking a rock down the street and thinking it's a soccer ball, for Pete's sake. I mean, it's just, there's this thing about it. And of course, we are talking to families and they've got all kinds of backstory. If I could just go down this track for a moment, we have Ruth's younger sister she and her husband have been married for 50 some years, and they have 7 boys who were under the age of 14, and they're still both sane as far as we can tell. But they had a game that they played when the boys were small, and this works for biological families. This works for or for kinship or adoptive families, that when they put them to bed, sometimes they would say, "Why don't you choose a word like horse?" And then the parents would tell a story from their childhood of riding a horse or being at a merry-go-round and getting the brass ring, as we used to do, and all of that. And what that does, that allows the child to be able to identify or find a piece of their own identity, whether it's kinship or biological. It's still mom and dad. And there's something profound about those simple, seemingly simple little games that in fact are deep.
And all based on this conversation that we want to have with the people that we care about.
Yep.
So that's great. Mark already said you have 4 kids and 12 grandkids and now 5 great grandkids. What role does storytelling play in, we do an entire session on passing along your values, making your family values contagious. And of course, we know that in families like ours, some families have a short window of time of influence, based on even just the duration a child might be in their home, or a lifetime. And regardless of that, we have an opportunity to make our values contagious. Well, what role do you think storytelling plays in building on and passing along family values?
I think even to be able to ask the question is, this is what, let's use this as an example. So we think in our family, and you're part of that, for even if it's this short time, you're part of that. We think, let's pick a virtue. We think that generosity is big. And I have a friend who leads an enterprise called I Like Giving. And you have generosity of attention, intention, you have generosity of time, treasure, all these kinds of things. And I said, where did you get that? And he said, from my grandpa. I said, why from your grandpa? He said, my grandpa was a baker, and he had a bakery business. But on the weekends, he would bake 16 special loaves of bread, and he would go to people that he knew in his town, and he would take them this fresh baked bread, and sometimes there'd be some money with it, and sometimes there'd be a thought with it, sometimes this, and he let me go with him. Sometimes he let me help make that bread, and so on a Saturday or on a Sunday, whenever it was, I would go with him for a long time. And so that virtue, that value, came out of that moment in time with a grandparent, and it shaped the whole thing. I mean, this person has a huge impact now because it came from that moment in time. And I think sharing those kind of things to be able to say, why do I think this way about other people? How do I see people, right? And oftentimes, how can you not, if you're going from place to place as a person in foster care, for example, how can you not start thinking, well, what is it about me, or that whole kind of thing, that I would keep doing this. It's interesting just having the conversation about how do we think about people. This past week, or 2 weeks ago, I went to memorial service in Phoenix, Arizona, for the wife of a dear friend. That happened to be that the dear friend, for 5 years back at the turn of 2000 to 2005, ran the Navy. And her name, his spouse's name, was Connie. And Connie passed away. And we went to a memorial service. And one of her sons said this. She had grown up in difficult situations. She ended up being adopted by an aunt and an uncle. And here she was a feisty woman, funny, deep, had a great heart for Jesus. And her son said this. My mother did not have conversations with people to find out if they were interesting. She just thought people were interesting. She had decided that any person she met was interesting before she had the conversation. I mean, what does it do to your world if you decide that anybody you talk to is interesting? You know, if you could hear this, I think that's just the coolest thing, because if I'm afraid of people because I think they might think poorly of me or whatever it is, then every day is a threat and I'm always on guard. If I think people inherently will be interesting and I care enough to ask, so where were you born and brought up, or what did you do for fun as a kid? Then they're gifts. So this way, every day I'm on guard. This way, every day's Christmas. And so just that value to talk about stuff like that was just I think it's a hoot.
It's great. It's great. There's a lot of ways to look at this, Dick. And we talk about story and how for the kids that our hearts are drawn to and that we're working with, again, who have difficult pasts, and we talk about story and the way that drawing their story out in healthy ways it can be a part of their healing. But connection is a whole nother piece of it. And we know that connection comes very difficult, and there are barriers to connecting with kids who have experienced trauma or really difficult things. There's all kinds of barriers they're not even aware of consciously in connecting with other people, but they have to get there. They have to move into this ability to connect in healthy ways and kind of relearn that. I think story has a lot to do with that. How do you think sharing one another's stories with each other, not just drawing another person's story out or really embracing this idea of kind of reframing my own story, but this sharing one another's stories with each other, how can that build on that connection in a healthy way?
Do you have an easier question?
No, I'm talking to a smart guy. I got to ask hard.
There's a principle in working with small groups, just generally in small groups, that if you're leading it, you go first. And as deep as you go, that's how deep everybody else will go. And so I think this idea of me saying to young Freddie, have you ever been scared? And of course, everybody's been scared. That's our default, right? And I say, I was scared once. I've been scared a lot by a lot of things. But let me tell you this one thing. I happened to mention in chapel when I was president of the college that from age 5 to age 28, when I was in that boarding school, I started stuttering. We don't know the reason for that, but 98% of the people who stutter in the world are boys. And I told them that I was a stutterer. Not long after that, a student made an appointment, came to see me, and he walked in and he sat down and he said, my name, I'll call him Harry. He said, my name is Harry, and President Foth, I wanted to see you because we have something in common. And I said, what's that, Harry? He said, we can't talk. And he and I had a conversation about that. And he had come from a home where there was trauma and abuse. He had a twin brother, and that young man could never talk, but Tony could. And he came to school, and he started sharing his story with me. And I said, what do you want to be? And he said, well, I'd like to be maybe a chaplain or something. And so I said, sometime in chapel, I'd like you to come and I'm going to say again that I'm a stutterer and that I'd like you to share your story. And he came and he stood up with me and he said these two things. Do I have time to share this part?
Please.
He said these two things. He said, I go to Cabrillo College to take a speech class. and it's for people who are afraid of speaking. And they said we needed to give a little speech on something. And I said, can I speak on anything? And they said, yes. He said, because I want to tell the class about Jesus. And so he said, this last month, President Foth, I gave my talk in class. And he said to the student body, I can do something you can't do, because I'm in my class at Cabrillo. I could tell that whole class about you, and you can't do that. I can do that. And I said, so what do you want to do with your? He said, I want to maybe be a chaplain. I said, so how do you get there? He said, well, I'm volunteering now to go to nursing homes, and I talk to the people about Jesus, and it works, because they don't care if I stutter, and it doesn't make any difference anyway, because most of them are deaf. And he said, and here's a person who went through horrific stuff, who had taken that piece and sort of turned it inside out and put it on like a glove. But he was able to do that because in that setting, because at some point I had said, well, I've had this challenge, and he connected with it. Yeah. And you and I both know that I think story, and especially people don't identify with your victories. We do not,
That's right.
Some guy became a senator. Oh, I don't identify with it. Some guy made $3 million yesterday. I don't. But if you tell me that you didn't want to go home when you were in high school at night because your parents would fight, and you felt like caught in the middle, you felt like Civil War, like you had blue pants and a gray coat, you're being shot by both sides, and you're trying to fix it, and you did. When you tell me that, I identify with that. I get that. Mm. And so when you share something of yourself that makes you vulnerable as opposed to victorious, people go there. Yeah. I've seen it over and over again with personal conversations in public settings. It just is.
So good.
I love that. And I love the natural honesty of it, because it's not saying even, oh, well, I have a similar situation, or I understand how you're feeling, or whatever. It's the vulnerability. It's the honesty. It's the grabbing on of things that, even if what you did for fun was kick a rock, and I, hit a baseball, it's the one thing that, like you said, lights us up, makes us feel connected, because it's the experience of, in that particular example of having fun, or the experience of feeling embarrassment in the one, or limited in the story that you just shared. That is amazing and so wise. Thank you for that.
Well, and if you think about it, if I can just hitchhike on that for a moment, when you think about it, yeah, I can't identify with Jesus Christ of Nazareth because he's God, for Pete's sake. That's the whole point. Mm-hmm. I identify with him because he's the suffering servant and comes to take on flesh. So he looks like me. So I get me, sort of, and that's the connection.
Mm-hmm. And of course, even as I was thinking this morning about our time with you, the obvious is Jesus told stories. And that is how he taught. Mm-hmm. The God who made us, designed us, and all of these things, use stories to tell us what God is like. Mm-hmm. And I've been listening recently to a series on the prodigal, and it's just so vivid and full color. And, I'm not a father, but I am a parent.
Yeah, you get it.
Who knows, what it's like to be both embraced and rejected, particularly as a foster adoptive parent. And so even like you just said, this idea of relating to the suffering of Jesus, and even the heartbreak of God the Father, as parents.
Yeah.
It's all story, and it's all what is it that I can wrap my mind around. And our God is so gracious that is what his word is full of. Not this, he is both other, holy, and Jesus in the flesh coming down, and Jesus telling us about God the Father in ways that as humans we can relate to.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the ultimate power of story. You know, you are invited to tell stories all over the country and beyond. We know that, and we are so privileged to have you with us and to call you friend. I just have to say one thing before I move on. I remember when we moved to Colorado and we were going through a really, really difficult time, and Mark was traveling a lot and things were hard, and that interest and that compassion that you have in people is genuine and sincere. And I remember going to church one night and you just asking me how things were going, and that's all you had to do. And I just wept. I didn't have to actually even explain what was going on in our home at the time. And I will never forget that. That only happens when someone shows interest. And I think it's a reminder, both because we talk so often about the power of walking alongside of other foster, adoptive, and kinship families, because we can relate. We all, I mean, it's infinite the way that our families look.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, that we are in just this one little box, but there is enough common that we need to be together. And so that we're walking alongside of people who understand and showing that genuine interest. So that's one thing I want to just repeat again to say to those who are listening. That's a gift that we give to one another, and we're drawn to people who show a genuine interest in us. So please find those people also, because you need it, and it's so powerful. And then the gift that is to our kids.
Yeah.
To show a genuine interest. I appreciate the story, you know, you just said, you know, that you likened it to, you know, asking a child, you know, have you ever been afraid? Because I have been. Not tell me your whole story.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to happen that way, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
we're learning from you how to prompt people to share with us without us scripting it for them, but it's going to come out in these little pieces. I have so one of the things I want to share, because I got to live. We just did a cross country drive, and I listened to your book, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I laughed, I cried, all of the things. It's your audiobook, The Stories I Love to Tell. So one of the things that was really cool is that your good friend and author, Mark Batterson, sits down with you, and without you knowing ahead of time what he's going to say, he offers phrases and then challenges you to think of stories that are related to those phrases. So we're going to do our own little mini version of this and put you on the spot here.
For all of you watching or listening, I'm being sandbagged here. I just want you to know that.
That's right. That's right.
I love
it. So a huge word in Finally Home world is resilience. So I want to ask you, what is a story that you could think of right now? When I say the word resilience, what or whom do you think of?
My mind immediately goes to my mother, only because I see her as one of the more resilient people in my lifetime. And it's not a child story, but she was the eldest of 6. She was born in 1910. Taft was president. There were 1,000 miles of paved road in the United States. That year, Henry Ford produced 10,000 cars, and the annual salary per capita was about $945. And she went through at the age of 4, World War I started, and so forth and so on. And the flu epidemic, and the stock market crash, and 10 years of the Great Depression, and World War II, and all that kind of stuff. And when she was older, and 29 years married, my father left. And there she was on her own. And she needed to get a job. She'd never worked outside the home, and she moved to Southern California by my sister. And when she did that, she taught herself to type and got a job at Huntington Memorial Hospital as an admitting clerk, and worked there till she was 71. They came to her and said, Gwen, we need to, you're 71, you need to stop. And so she went across the street to a very posh retirement center and worked there till she was 82. And she drove in Southern California. She lived in Pasadena, drove in California until she was 92. And, she really wasn't a little old lady in tennis shoes from Pasadena. I mean, if you drove with my mother, your prayer life was increased. I mean, she thought she was still in India. I mean, it was just crazy. But she was so, she had three parts about her or several parts. One is that she loved Jesus. Second, she loved her family. 3 was she had a sense of humor, and 4 was she never lost her song. But her resilience with humor was sort of legendary in our family. Can I just share a couple of stories real quick?
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're here.
And see, I think when we think about the kind of settings we're talking about, we tend to think, well, there's nothing funny about this. There's nothing funny about being moved from home to home, or the challenges of trauma and so forth. But my experience is that people who can see humor or the funny side of a dark thing, it's a gift if they can see it that way. But she when she was 96, she lived till 100. But when she was 96, she started having some dementia. I called her on her 96th birthday, and I said, Mom, this is Dick. She was in Orange County, Southern California, and I was in Washington, D.C. I said, Mom, this is Dick. And she was in a home with several other ladies. She turned to somebody and said, my brother's on the phone. She had three brothers, or 4 brothers, none of whom were named Dick. I said, no, Mom, this is Dick, your son. She said, oh, Dick, honey, you live way over there, don't you? Yeah. I said, yes, I live in Washington, D.C. She said, I have a son in Washington, D.C. And I said, Mom, that's me. And she just cackled and said, there must be 2 of you. Or the time in her 80s when she was driving in Pasadena and a car ran a stop light and T-boned her, just hit her. And my mom was always dress up old school. She'd go to the grocery store, high heels and what we called nylons back in the day, and nice dress. And she got hit by this guy, and the police came, and she's sitting in the car, and they said, are you okay? She said, I think I'm all right. I'm not hurt, so forth. And she looked out the window and she said, oh, but look, we killed that poor little dog in the collision. The officer said, ma'am, said that little dog, we killed that little dog. And he looked down and he grinned at her and said, ma'am, that's not the dog, that's your wig.
Oh.
What's funny about that story is that she had to tell others on herself. Nobody else was in the car. And that frame of reference of being able to look at life, even the hard parts, and laugh at it at some point was something that plus the presence of Jesus in her life gave her a positive quality that I just haven't seen to that dimension, in that dimension up close with anybody else. And I see that in kids. I see a little of that in our 2 grandchildren that I took to school today. And anyway,
that's fantastic. I've got one more question, Dick, and when we talk about this, the world that we work in and live in, and families that have said yes to foster care, adoption, kinship placements, the miracles of adoption, and God's word describes it this way, is taking, you know, our brokenness, which includes sometimes abuse and neglect and trauma, and then just through a series of God's miracles, and he allows us to participate in it.
Yes.
Beauty is on the other side of it.
Yep.
And it's the promise that anchors our families. Is there a story for you that comes to mind that shows beauty in the midst of brokenness?
You know, I don't, and again, I've already talked about my mom, but if it's okay to go back there,
Absolutely.
there are several. Can I tell two quick ones?
Yes,
You
please.
can.
Okay. In that book, I tell the story of Anna Tomasek. Anna Tomasek was born in 1902 in Dayton, Ohio. She ended up going and working in India with orphans. And just recently, I found out that that it started out with orphans of lepers. So you're negated on two fronts, right? And she took them in and cared for them and all of that. And over the years, with coworkers, over 50 years, 420 children raised, and they all had the last Arabic name of Light, Nur, the name for light. And there, you know, you're responsible for marriages and arranging everything and all that sort of thing. But when she came and spoke with us at the college one year, not long before she passed away, she was in her late 70s. And I asked her, what's a story that just stands out to you about God's grace on the other side of brokenness, right? And she said, we had a coworker. We had 23 adopted children or orphan children in our home. 7 of them were babies. They were nursing, and we didn't get much sleep, you know, because of that. But our prayer lives were tremendous, you know. And she said, one morning there was a knock on the door. I went to the door, and here stands a guy with a bundle in his hand. And there was no sewer system in this little village right up against the Nepali border. And he had gone out early in the morning to the dung heap outside of town to relieve himself, saw something moving under a tree and brushed away with a stick, leaves. And there in the dirt was a newborn Indian baby girl, umbilical cord and placenta still attached. And some travelers had come through during the night. And in that culture at that time, girls were throwaway items. And so this man brought her to Mamaji, respected mother, said, we took her in, brought her up until she was 7 years old, and she was adopted to a wealthy family in New Delhi. They found out she had musical gifts, and when she was 16, she was so proficient on the piano, they sent her to the London Conservatory of Music. 20 years later, they get a letter with a photo of her with the royal family at Buckingham Palace, where she had just done a concert. And when I tell the story, I just say, and then I asked her, and what is she doing now? And she said she's married to a British corporate executive, and she holds Bible studies for business women in downtown London. Wow. And you know, I say when I share this story, I say it's a long way because Anna had gone through a broken engagement in Ohio before she went to India. She had to give that up to do this. And it's a long way from a broken engagement in Dayton, Ohio to the border of Nepal. And it's a long way from a dung heap in North India to Buckingham Palace. But when you follow Jesus, when you leave yourself open to him and ask him to help you in the mix, you know, he takes you places you never dreamed you could go. He gives you ideas you never thought you could have. And he gives you friends that last forever. Mm-hmm. So I think that in terms of from brokenness to beauty, I mean, and I didn't even make that story up. That story is true.
Oh, wow.
That's not one of my fictions. But the other one of that, looking at my mom, and she had a healthy childhood, then went through brokenness, then went this piece. When she was 90 years old, they did a birthday party for her at the Hyatt or something in Santa Ana. My brother-in-law had a friend who had a Rolls Royce. We picked her up in a Rolls Royce and took her and near 100 of her friends. And along the way, she was a wonderful pianist and an organist. And she, in her 90s, she would go to nursing facilities and say, I'm going to go play for those old people, right? And so somebody said, Gwen, why don't you play something for us? And she went over to the piano and sat down. And she would also always start with sort of show tunes, from musicals and stuff, and then morph into hymns and then gospel songs. And her signature song was, I would love to tell you what I think of Jesus, or no one ever cared for me like Jesus. Maybe that was it. No one ever cared for me like Jesus. He's the one who always cares and understands. And she just started singing, and all of a sudden everybody else started singing. And when she was 93, my sister said, what are we going to do for mom? Because you can't give presents to people who are 93. They're already started giving the presents you gave them before back. They've always started doing that. So I said, why don't you take her to a nice place? So they went for lunch to the Ritz-Carlton in Dana Point, California. And you walk in and there's a guy playing a big Busendorf piano or Steinway or something. And when they sat down, one of my cousins, there were three of them, one of my cousins went over and said to the guy, did you ever take a break? He said, we do. And he said, well, this lady over here is a wonderful pianist. Yeah, and it's her 93rd birthday. Do you mind? And a few minutes later, he came over and said, you're on, ma'am. And they took her over and sat her down, and she started doing the show two thing again. And then she started to sing a song. It's an old, what we would call a camp meeting song about heaven. And it goes, there's going to be a meeting in the air, the sweet, sweet by and by. And oh, I want to see you over there, way beyond the sky. And she starts singing this, and people have gathered round. And people start singing with her. Those who were older, who had been in those contexts, started singing. Of course, my sister and my cousins were standing over there bawling. But what is it about a life that has experienced hurt and pain and rejection and brokenness that in their 90s can throw their head back in a public place, start playing and singing a song like that, and just affirm that if you don't continue to see people as threats, if you in fact have an interest in people before they're interested in you, if in fact you make space in your life for healing, it can just happen. And that's just it's sort of metaphor, that I say, when I'm really old, because I'm going to be 83 in a couple of weeks or a few weeks, but I'm not old yet. I mean, I'm upper middle age, but I want to be like that kind of person.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. I think you are that kind of person. So this has been beautiful and a blessing, and glory be to God, because I know it's going to be an encouragement to anybody who listens. And so you have said so many wonderful things, and I just want to give you an opportunity one more time, just acknowledging that many who would be listening quite possibly are wondering how on earth their stories or the stories of their children will turn into anything positive, could turn into anything positive, and this is the really important word. So I'm really setting you up here.
Okay.
Redeeming. What do we believe about redemption?
Redemption is that process. It's a moment, but it's also a process. That even the hardest thing that happens to me, I know people who have had family members murdered. I know of a person whose brother has been in jail forever. I know of people who should not be walking upright, metaphorically, who, because of the redemptive power of God, most often coming through another person who loved them when they didn't feel lovable, who cared for them when they hardly cared for themselves. Over and over again, I have seen that happen. And if Jesus means rescue, which I believe it does, if Jesus means that I save you, I don't think there's anybody beyond that reach. And when we are his ambassadors, by our hearts, by our interest, by our curiosity even, redemption happens, I think, at every turn. If I'm curious, if I care, if I look you in the eye. I have a book right here. Where is it? It's here somewhere. A book right here by David Brooks, who writes for the New York Times. And it's called How to Know a Person, the Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen. When I don't think, when I feel overlooked, when I feel invisible because of what I've gone through, because I'm so focused on my pain, and somebody comes along and looks me in the eye and says, "Hi, tell me your name." That's the start of redemption, I think. And, I just physically, scientifically, neuroscientists say, when you look somebody in the eye, when we look at each other, even on this screen, there's a sense in which we're reading each other's brains. And to be acknowledged that way, here is the God who says, I know you. I've known you from your mother's womb. You were never out of my sight. And even though you feel lost, I will chase you up the days and down the years. I'm coming to find you. Because before you were that parents, you were mine. You're mine before that. And anyway, I'm going to get carried away here if I'm not careful.
Carried away is fine. Again, thank you. I know that God will use this to remind people that they are seen, that He is the God who sees. That goes for parents and kids alike. That is all for this week, and we look forward to being with you next month as we talk about the importance of mentorship and hear the amazing story of one of Finally Home's teen mentors, Andrew Wilson. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified when we publish a new video. We will be live each month for this Family Journey show, as well as sharing additional resources in between you won't want to miss out on. And we will for sure share Dick's new book, The Stories I Love to Tell. Thank you. Mark and I, from the bottom of our heart, we are grateful for who you are in our lives, our family. And hearing you share, we can vouch for the fact to say that you are genuinely exactly who you appear to be. And we're grateful that you gave us your time today.
Thank you, Dick.
My joy, and back at you. Just to know what you guys have done and are doing, to just to redeem situations and people who oftentimes feel the pain of being overlooked or cast off or whatever it is. But what treasures? You guys are treasure hunters. That's what you are. You're treasure finders. And to be able to be a little tiny part of that, for me, huge gift. Thank you for giving me this gift today of being able to be on here.
Thank you so much.
Becoming a foster, adoptive, or kinship caregiver is exciting and scary all at the same time. There is no way of fully knowing what personality the child or children will have, or what trauma they have experienced. Finding the resources to help you navigate the day-to-day challenges can be tricky. This is where Resilient Roots comes in. This annual membership is the toolbox you need to support whole family strengthening. You'll have access to on-demand videos from our trauma-informed, research-based curriculum that teaches each member of your family how to speak up, listen, and cooperate. By building these foundational blocks of family communication, each family member will feel valued, heard, and truly understand their big emotions. Learn more by visiting finallyhome.net/resilient-roots. Use code FamilyJourneyShow for 50% off your first year.